So now that we are done with this, the next thing we need to do is let's close this up and look at routing in our application. So currently now what we do is that we just have a single wildcard route here. Let's add one more route. So let's say so to app.get, I'm going to go to /ping, and then we have arrow function here. We'll take in the, can I just copy this from here? Yeah, and then what do we want to do if we receive ping? We're just going to say res.send. So this is going to be status 200, and we're just going to say pong. Now these are just two things here, and what are we doing with them? So if the server is running now, if I go back, I think it's okay, the server is restarting. So you see, whenever I save now, the server automatically restarts on its own. Connect to the DB. If I go to the browser and I go back here, remember when I go here, it says not found. If I go to slash, I think ping or something, now it says pong. Now, if you look at that very well, this we can also do our routing from here, but I don't want to do our routing from here. I want us to move it out of this particular file. I will leave these two. I'll leave these two like this. I will leave this default one that whatever happens. But remember, this should be the last thing here in our routing side. This should be the last thing, so that before it gets to this part, it must have passed through every other route that we have. Then if it finally gets here, we do not have it. So we say, oh, 404, we don't have that. Let's create a folder to where we do our routing in. So let's go back to the source and let's right click on new folder, and let's call it routes. So this will contain our routes. And let's go back here, and like we did again, let's create an index.ts. This is going to export all our routes. So let's go back, still in the routes folder. Let's right click on new file, and let's create auth.ts. So this is going to contain the auth route. So I'm going to say import router. So I'm going to import router from Express. We have router from the Express package. And what do we want to do? We're going to say const router is equal to router. So we now have a router here. And then we can actually export it. So I'm going to say export router. I want it to be wrapped like this. I like named component. So I've called it router here, and I've exported it. Now you might ask, why don't I just add export const router? That's because I'm going to pass in some other things to this router. But for now, let's just pretend that this is how this route is. Or let's add a single route. Let's say router dot, what's it going to be? Dot post. And what is it posting to? Let's say join. So once you hit that, once you hit slash join, post is going to call this guy. Let's go to our index. In the routes folder, let's go to our index and let's export router. Now one thing I need to do is that I want to change the name. So I'm going to say import router as auth router. So I don't just want it to be called router from /auth. So now the name is now auth router. I export auth router. Why I have to change this is because I'm going to do the same thing for recipe router. And if I say this is router and that other one too is router, then we'll be confused. So let me also create another file called recipe.ts. And then right here, I'm just going to do the same. Let me just copy what we have here and paste it in the recipe side. And then go back here and also import that. So I'm going to say import router as recipe router from /recipe. So with this now, let's also say recipe router. With this now, I have my router exported from the index here. I can go back to the index.ts. And one thing I want to do is that I'm going to say that app.use as a middleware. Anything that starts with /auth. So if it starts with /auth, I want the auth router to handle that. So I'm going to pass that. Then anyone that starts with /recipe, I want a recipe. I want the recipe router to handle that for me. So with that being said now, any request that comes in, sorry, any request that comes in that start with slash auth is now going to be handled by the auth router. So it's going to be like this. If you start with slash auth, it's going to be slash auth slash join. So it's going to be together slash auth slash join. So whatever I pass there. So let me go back to the index again. And if you notice, I'm importing auth router and recipe router from dot slash route. So I don't have to say dot slash route dot auth or dot slash route dot recipes because I have them exported in my index here. Now, what do we do here? If you look at the join here, what do we need to do? What we need to do is to pass in a controller. So, this is a middleware chain. So, what's going to happen is if we hit this route, if we put space comma here, we can pass a middleware as okay, do something or do something or do something. So, what we can do here, we can pass a validate function to validate the input. We can pass in a controller to do one or two things to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder called controllers in my source. So I go here and I create a folder, call it controllers. Oh, I'm in caps lock, controllers. Now this is a very simple application, so I'm not going to create services. We're just going to stop with controllers. So there's not going to be services. Controller is going to handle both. So in the controller, I'm going to do the same thing by creating an index.ts. So you must have been used to that pattern now. And I'm also going to have auth.ts here inside the controllers and also recipe.ts. Now, what do I want to do? In the auth.ts, I'm just going to, for now, import the request, the response from Express. So I'm going to remove this guy. And then I'm going to have a single thing here. So I'm going to say export const, let's call it register. I will explain why the name is like that now in a minute. For login, I'm going to say is going to be an asynchronous function. We'll come back to that. It's going to be asynchronous function. Now, why am I calling it register or login? The reason why I'm calling it register or login is because in this application, we're just going to have a single endpoint. If you hit this endpoint, and you are excuse me, you are already your details are already in our database, we just log you in. If your details are not in our database, we add you to our database and log you in. So this is like both registration and login. We are not doing a validation. We are not going to send you a token to check if you are correct or not. If you want to do that, then this is going to be longer than expected. Or we don't want to say, okay, verify your password, sorry, verify your email. What we just want to do is you give us an email. If it exists, we log you in. If it doesn't exist, we create an account for you and also log you in. So let's go back to the index.ts and let's export that. So I'm going to say export, register or login, which also imports that. So we now have a controller that we can use in our route. So if I go to the route, I go to auth.ts, I can say that after this join, I want to call register or login, which I like to have my import below my relative import below my absolute import. So what this simply means is that once we hit this route, we're now going to call this particular function. So we can test it out. Let's say we go back here and let's pass in request, which is going to be request. Let's pass in response, which is going to be response. So what do we want to do? First of all, let's just play around with it and say return return. So we don't want it to execute response dot, let's just send something and say yeah, you joined. So we say you joined. So I'm going to be using Thunder client to make my API request. If you don't have Thunder client installed, you can just go to the extension tab, or you can also use Postman, but I'm just going to be using Thunder client. But let's say you want to use Thunder client too, you can just click on extensions and then you search for Thunder client, and then you see it here, Thunder client, and then you click on it and then install. So if I click on it now, I can well, I already have it, but then you can just click on install. All right. Now let's assume you already have that installed, or you'll be using Postman. So let me go to Tunnel Client. I'm going to pull it up. So I have Tunnel Client, and I'm going to click on New Request. So I believe this is what you're going to have to. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to say localhost. Our server is running on port 4000. Let's take a look at here. Yeah, you see port 4000. So I go to localhost. I think let me port 4000. Now, if I send this is a GET request, I'm going to get the 404. So it says 404. The route requested is not found. Okay, I think I'll change this message to error. And then, but what I want to hit is the post. So when we hit it, we're expecting to see, yeah, you joined, because that's what we sent. So if I go back now and I hit, and I have to say slash auth slash recipe. I'm sorry, not recipe, slash join. And then once I hit send, it says, yeah, you joined. So it is working. So what simply happens is that, let me go back to our index here. Once you hit any route that starts with slash auth, that is passed to this middleware here, auth router. And then auth router now looks at it, say, okay, oh, is a post request slash join. Okay, what should I do? Then it calls this function, and then it passes everything that is coming with it, which is the request and the response. Then we ourselves, we then extract that request and response here, and then do whatever I want to do with it. But one thing I want you to know is that validation. What if we want to check that there is email here and there is password, and then maybe they are up to 7 letters or 3 letters or 2 letters? What if we want to check that? Are we going to come here in our application and then we say, oh, request.body, do we have password? If we don't have password, we throw an error. Now, if we imagine that we do that for so many things, let's say we have so many routes that we have to hit. Are we going to keep checking manually like that? It's not going to be efficient. And because of that, I have decided that in this application, we are going to be using a validation that have all these things written for us. For example, we can just call a method to check instead of writing that method ourselves. For example, you want to validate that an email is correct. Instead of you having to write a regex to check if an email is correct, it has already been written and we don't have to do that. So there are so many packages to do that in Express. You can use Express Validator, you can use Yoop. But for this project, I'm going to be using Yoop, and therefore we are going to go and install Yoop. So I think I will do this one from the VS Code terminal. So you can just click on terminal, click on new terminal. I'll close this debug here and I'll switch to Git Bash. I'm seeing WSL there. All right, so right here I'm going to say yarn. So yarn, let me use it, yarn add Yoop. So Yoop is the package we are going to use to validate. So we're going to set this as a middleware so that before our application, before the request even gets to our controller, Yoop has checked it and made sure that, oh, everything that we need for that action is there. So I'm going to say yarn add Yoop. So Yoop is done installing. We now need to also install typing for Yoop. So we're going to say yarn add dash d at types slash Yoop. So this is just typing for Yoop. And we are done installing. I'm going to clear this and then I'll close this off. So with this now, we now need to create a middleware that we are going to pass to our route. So once what we want to do is once you hit this route, we are going to pass that middleware to validate that particular request data, and then we then say, okay, if it is fine, then pass on to the register or login controller. If it is not, throw an error. So if there's an error, we won't even get to this register or login controller. And that is not just the beauty of middlewares. So I'm going to go back into my source here, and I'm going to create a folder called middleware, middle or middlewares. Inside this middlewares, we're going to create index, like it's our tradition now to be creating index each time. Create a new folder where we then export everything in that folder in that index. And then we are going to create a file here, we call it validate.ts. So what do we want to do? Let's import some stuff from Express. Let's import the next function because I think next function. Oh, let's import the next function. Next function. Let's import requests. Let's import response from. I'll close this up. from Express. So all these things we are going to get them from Express. And let's also import one thing from Yoop, which is called info type from Yoop. So this is get the types from the data that's into you. So we're going to export a function that we are calling validate. So we're exporting a function called validate. And we are going to pass this function a schema. Now this schema is not MongoDB schema, it's going to be a Yoop schema. So in Yoop, you give Yoop the shape of an object, how you want this object to look, and then you pass in your errors. And then you validate to see, oh, does this match the shape of this object? If yes, then everything goes fine. If no, then it throws an error. Now, if you look at this play, we say any, but we'll come back to fix that once we have a particular schema from you. So what do we want to do for here? We now say, passing this schema, we say that we are just testing. So we say await schema.validate. So this is just a method from Yoop, the validate method. And what do we want to do? Now, if you look at this particular thing that we have here, what this simply means is that if we have request.body, then we are going to pass an object called body, and the information we're going to have is request.body. And then that is why this dot 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 means. So if we don't have request or query, for example, request or query will not be available in this side. If we don't have request or params, it's not going to be there. So we're going to have request of body, request of query, request of params, which are the three ways that you can pass your data. So in any of this one, if you find if any of this is available, then it's going to be passed to you. If they are not available, they will not even exist here in this object at all that we are passed to you. Now, if everything goes fine, we just want to call the next function. So we just want to call the next function. So which simply means continue to the next middleware. Move on to the next middleware. So whenever we call that, say, okay, move on to the next middleware. We are done with this middleware. Move to the next one. Deal with it. Then move to the next one. You know, that kind of stuff. So, but then if we have an error, we simply want to return a 400 status, an error. We simply want to return response dot status rest.state, we simply want to return rest.status 400.json, and then we are going to say error, and error is going to be error.message. So whatever error message that Yoop is going to give us back, we want to throw it to here. Oh, maybe there is no request.body.email, excuse me, there's no request.body.password or request.query.whatever or request.params or anything. So whatever error that is thrown by Yoop, we are going to get it here. So first of all, let's actually create a single schema to even test what we have. So since we have the auth controller ready, let's go to source. So go to source, right click and click on new folder. Let's call it schema dash validations. So this is going to be where we are going to validate our schema. And right inside here again, we are going to have another text.ts, which is just going to export everything inside the schema validation. So let's call this one auth.ts. So here inside the schema validation, we are going to validate for auth. That is, you want to log in or register, whichever one you call it. So what I'm going to do is here is that since it's just validation, I'm going to write everything right here inside the index. I won't create separate files for the different one for auth and for recipe. You can do that if you want to. So first of all, I'm going to say import, excuse me, everything as Yoop from Yoop. Sorry, from Yoop. And then we're going to create a shape for join or whatever. So we're going to call it join schema. And what does it do? So we say const join schema. We have Yoop.object, which is just we telling Yoop the shape that we want. And we're saying that in the first one, we're going to have body, and then this body is going to be a Yoop object that contains email, which is of type string and is email. And then we pass an error since we say dot is required, email is required. You don't have to pass anything. Yoop already has its own inbuilt message, but I just wanted to write that one. And then we also say that we have password, which is a string, but it has a minimum length of 7, and the password must be say okay greater than 6. In case there's an error, we say password must be greater than 6. And then if there's no password at all, we're going to throw this password is required error. So this is a simple simple schema here. just validating what this body here is standing for is we are telling you that this is going to come from request.body. Remember what we had in our middleware. Where is our middleware? Validate here. Remember what we have here. We want to check request.body, and then if it's there, we're going to pass all these details there. So if I go back to the validation index.ts, that is what this is doing for us. So you don't have to actually, you can just write this alone to validate. But since we want to check for request.body, request.params, request.query, and we don't know which of them at that time is going to come, we have to shape it like this and then use that there. All right. So I'm going to export this. This is going to say export join schema, and then we should be able to use this in our, let me shrink this a bit. We should be able to use this in our route. So if you go back to our route, I think I have not exported validate yet. So let me go here and say export validate. So just imagine I have other middlewares that I want to write, then you can just write them here and export everything at once here inside your index. So you can just check one place and then get everything. So we're going to go back to the auth in our route here, and we're going to say that once it is this, then we want you to call the validate. First of all, want to call the validate function. Let me see what we have here because this is not following what I wanted to do. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and I will remove this. It's supposed to just be like this. So I'm going to say validate. Put a comma. What's going on? Okay, it says he expects one argument, but we got 0. So we have to pass in a schema. Now we have to pass in the join schema. So we now pass in the join schema. So with this now, where is it? I just wanted to bring that down. Like I said, I like my relative imports to be below my absolute, especially packages that are external. All right, so this is this now. So what's going to happen is that once we hit this post here slash join, then the loop is going to validate, and then if it doesn't find email and password, it's going to throw an error before it even gets here. So remember in our Thunder client that the we didn't provide anything, and it simply sent out the message. Where is it? Saying that can't find it anymore. But it sent them as a message earlier saying that yeah, you joined. Now, if we do that again, it's going to fail because we don't have email and password. So if I hit send now, it says password is required. It shows an error. So let me go back here and go to body and let me pass a. So this is going to be JSON, and I'm going to say password. I'm going to say go. Oh, it's probably going to complain that the length is it must be greater than 6. So I need to say just let me type random stuff. And let's send. And it says email is required. Now I need to provide email. So you can see that the middleware, even before we get to this register or login, the middleware already runs, and then Yoop is already validating this data for us. So it's very, very easy, very powerful. Instead of we going into our controller to be checking if there is an email, if there is a password, and all that, then we're going to write a validation. Okay, even if there is an email, does this email pass this regex or not? You takes care of that for us. So with this now, we are going to do the same thing for the recipe. So let's create, let's go to the recipe route and create recipe routes. But first of all, before we do that, let's create schemas for the recipes. So it'll be very, very easy for us to just play everything along. I've gone ahead to create schemas for the recipes for different actions. So the create recipe schema, when we are creating a recipe, this is the shape we want it to have. When we are getting a recipe, getting a single recipe, this is the shape we want it to have. Which and then when we are searching for a particular recipe, this is the shape we want it to have. And then when we are getting or fetching all the a user's recipe, a particular user recipe, then this is the shape that we want it to have. So you can take a look at it. It's the same thing as the join schema. So I don't need to explain that again. It's just that some of them have keys of query, simply meaning that okay, they are going to be coming from request or query. Some have a key of param saying that oh, they are going to be coming from request or params, and then somebody saying they are going to come from request or body. So I'm going to export everything. I'm going to say create recipe get recipe get user recipes. So we have everything now exported. If I shrink a bit, let me take this out. So we have everything ready to be used. Now let's go back to the what's it called? The routes again. And let's go to recipe routes. Now, obviously, I've already explained how this is going to work. So we don't have to keep going through all the routes again. All right. So I'm just going to have these routes. So if you look at our recipe, we are going to have route star slash get, which is going to be find, so searching for user. So when you go to slash recipe slash find, and then we are going to be passing a query parameter here, which we are going to use to search. Now this is crying here, screaming that I need to provide these guys. So let me provide that. I imported the validate function. Let me import the rest of them. We're going to say search recipe schema, create recipe schema, get user recipe, get user recipe schema, finally get recipe schema. And we are importing all this from dot slash. We are going into the middlewares, I believe. No, I don't think so. I'm going to the schema slash, yeah, just into the schema. So it seems like these two are throwing an error. Okay, let me check. Seems like we don't have that search. Oh, sorry. Here. So it seems I forgot to pass in search recipe schema, which I've just done now. And then get user recipe schema. I need to find out if I exported that too. Let's check. Let's check here. Okay, I think the spelling is incorrect. Is it incorrect? Let me see. Is it incorrect? Get user. Okay, so I have a spelling error. I'm going to fix that to be recipes. So with this now, if you hit any of these routes, then these guys are going to validate. And we're going to call the validate function, and we pass in the schema. So this is for searching. We pass the schema for searching. This is for creation. We pass in the schema for creation to you. This is when you search using the user ID. If you want to get recipes that belong to a user, and then finally, if you just want to get a simple recipe, slash ID. So with this now, we have set up our middleware that will be running for all this application. But what do we want to do if these things are successful? We have not handled that, so we need to create handlers for that. But before we do that, let's finish up with our auth module.